Hi everybody! Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing a basic rebuild on an LS1 power steering pump. Now, we've already taken our pump off. I'm not going to make a video on how to do that. There's about 1 million of them on YouTube. But there aren't a lot of tutorials on how to actually rebuild them, which is surprising because they're actually very simple. Most people will fit a reconditioned or new pump, which is anywhere from, I don't even know, from $100, $200, maybe more, I don't know. Seal kit, 15 bucks off eBay, and you only need some pretty basic tools and you can rebuild them yourself. So we're just going to show you how. Right, so the way these pumps come apart is from the back. So you've got a rear cover there. It's actually spring loaded on the back side and it's held in by this snap ring that you can see sits around the inside there. So the first thing you're going to do is take a clamp. It doesn't need a lot of pressure, just enough to push the cover off the snap ring. You see on the bottom side of the pump here there's actually a hole. That's how you get your snap ring out. So once that's got some pressure off it, you should be able to pretty easily turn the snap ring around until the gap's somewhere around here or here, just so that you're on the end there. So I usually just use a pick. You get a pick, push that snap ring through there, small screwdriver, and you can get the end of the snap ring out like that. Once you've got it started, just pops out like so. So we've got a couple of just little containers just to put things in as we pull them apart, and as always I like to keep things in order the way that they actually come out. So once that snap ring's out, you can just slowly release like that, and that rear cover will eventually just find its way out. So just a couple of taps and the spring will help you push that out. And you should be able to get something in there just to help you lever that out. Pick through the hole in the back isn't too bad either. And it should eventually just pop out like that. So that's your rear cover. Just give that a bit of a clean up as we go. So that is what the inside of the rear cover looks like. That's your spring for the back cover. Just take him out. So that's your manifold there. So this is the high pressure side of the pump, and there's your two inlets into the pressure side, and that runs to the steering box. So that's held in with two dowels. Now this is where they leak from. This is the common problem. That O-ring in the back there seals against that outer surface of the cover. And what happens is over time they basically flatten out, and well, obviously because that's the pressure side, you're releasing pressure straight out the backside. And it's a very common problem with these pumps, and it's the reason most people will replace them. So easy enough just to get that old one out. We don't really need to be too gentle with it because we're not going to save it, and we don't really want to. So you probably can't see, but when you poke this with the pick, it is very hard. It is no longer supple, it's soft, and to be honest, it's been quite a pain in the ass to get out. These really small jeweler screwdrivers usually come in very handy for this sort of thing. If I can just get that in there. That's how far gone this one is. It is really doesn't want to come out. Sometimes doing this stuff, it'd be really handy if you had like 3 hands, maybe even 4. Sometimes would be very handy. Righto, so there you go. That's an example of just how bad that one is. That actually split once you pull it out. If I do that, so that is how brittle they get. and it's pretty obvious that there's no way that's going to seal anything. Now that we've got our seal out, the next thing, you'd see these two dowels on the outside. They run right through to the front of the case and they locate everything in there. So it's easy enough just to grab them, some needle nose pliers. They can come out at this point, like so. So once you've taken the dowels out, a pair of multi-grips or something like that, you just need to try and get in here and grab this. Try not to damage it too much, but they can be pretty stubborn and sometimes they can need a lot of encouragement to come out. But yeah. So it's a manifold, that's the running surface for the pump. There's a couple of scores on this one, but overall it's not too bad. That's the inner workings of the pump. So that's how they work, is these vanes, as it turns around, there is actually in that manifold, you can actually see that's how it works there. So as these vanes, they'll pick up from the intake, and when you've got that lined up, basically when the pump turns, it'll come around to here where it's got an opening, and that will let the high pressure side release up through the manifold. It then diverts it, as you can see in these ones back down, that actually runs to the center. That pushes the vanes back out when they run into those cavities there. And that's how the pump works. So once you've got that out, just be careful when you turn this upside down. Get your veins and stuff will start to fall out. And we'll try and get our that pump body out of there as well, if we can. We can get him. So it's the pump body. Just make a note when you pull it out which way up it goes. Those marks, the diamonds, go to the back of the pump. So once you get that out, you can just slide or grab all of these vanes. Sometimes they will just fall out on their own. Needle nose pliers just come in very handy. Just make sure you keep those vanes pretty safe. Put them in one of our little storage containers. This is the real pain in the arse bit. If I can just clean up this here. So what holds this rotor and the whole of that shaft in there, just on the top of that shaft there is a really tiny snap ring, and it is a major pain to get off. The best tools to use is some of your small screwdrivers and a jeweler's screwdriver just to try and get in behind it. The other thing you'll need is a lot of patience, and you have to be very, very careful when this thing does come off. Just be ready for, once you get it up, just be really careful to try and not let it just come flying off the end, because if it does, it will travel probably a fairly long way and they're almost impossible to find once that happens. So this is going to be pretty hard to film. We're probably not going to be able to see too much, but we'll see what we can do. I'm going to try and keep it covered with a rag just in case of that situation of it sort of flying everywhere, which has been known to do. got one end of the snap ring up and around. This is where you have to be really, really careful. Is trying to get over the top because it will snap and it will go flying. So I'm just going to cover it with a rag like that and try and just gently work around it in the dark where I can't see it. Just like that. And that's it. That little pain in the ass there. And it's a real pain to try and get out, but it can be done. They do stretch a little bit when you take them off, so you've got to just sort of close the gap up a little bit. That's another time to be very, very careful, because that can also send them flying. So, okay. That is literally the most difficult part about the whole operation, is just getting that tiny, tiny little snap ring off. So from there, the rotor is just on a spline shaft, and it just comes out. Because of the oil, it'll just bring that bottom plate with it. There you go. That's the rotor and pump. After that, you've got your rotor, the spline there, and that will just, if you're careful, a bit tight, but it should just come off there. It'll take a little bit of working. This pump seems to be very tight, but there you go, that's it. So that's the shaft. This is the beauty about these things, is you don't actually have to take the front pulley off, because that can be a real pain in the bum. So that's basically you completely dismantled. Clean that up too. And that's the second O-ring back there. That's what seals on that front manifold that we pulled off that sits in behind the cover. So that's another O-ring that does the same thing as the rear one. It'll become very brittle and won't seal properly. That won't cause a leak outside the pump like the back one will, but what it does do is cause a lack of performance, because that actually seals off the low pressure side from the high. So you'll get less power steering pressure than you'd like. So if we try and get this one out now, yep, it's the same as the other one where it's extremely brittle. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one does exactly what the other one did and just snaps once we can actually, yeah. So I'm basically digging that out in pieces at the moment. You do get some that aren't as bad, where the O-rings will not be quite as brittle, they won't break, but you will find that they're quite flat. They just flatten themselves out over time and causes the exact same problem. This one can be a bit harder to get out because it's further back inside the housing, which makes it a lot harder to get a decent bite on it with your screwdriver to try and ply it out like that. So you find that that one is exactly the same. They're just brittle, old, and not doing their job anymore at all. So we'll give that a blowout with some air and make sure we get rid of that stuff. First thing we're going to do though, and it's the first seal that you will replace, is the front one. It wasn't actually leaking on this thing, but we do have a new one, so we'll replace it anyway. But it will come out. So yeah, this one's exactly the same. You can see there that's actually split all the rubber on that too, so it probably wasn't doing its job too well or would have failed in the very near future. So we're happy to be replacing that one. You see that hole in the front there? Actually runs through to that small hole down the bottom. That's an oil feed or an oil return for the shaft. That lubricates the shaft. You can see somewhat of the rifling down there. That's what lubricates the front shaft. That's one of the passages we'll make sure we blow out really well with the air and make sure it's nice and clear before we put any more seals back in. So we'll go do that now. So we've got a nice clean housing now. All the passages have been blown out, and with particular attention to those O-ring grooves to make sure there's nothing left in them. So the first step now, we're going to start reassembling. First step is to put the new seal in the front of the housing. The easiest way to do that is to get a socket, something like that. That is right about the right size, just slightly smaller than the outside diameter, and a hammer and a nice solid surface. And the most important thing is just to make sure that they go in nice and square. If they start to cock one way or something like that, they can jam up and you can destroy, you can wreck the seal. But they are fairly forgiving. So we'll go over to a bit more solid surface. We'll knock that one in. So we've got a nice flat surface. Just because of the nut on the back, it just pays just to hang that over the side like that. And basically just small taps, you don't have to bash it in all at once, and just keep an eye on it, make sure that it's going in nice and square. And you'll sort of hear it once it's home, right about like that. And that's your new front seal. As you can see, no damage to the front of it. It went in there nice and square, and it's good to go. So a good thing to do with any new seal, any new rubber surface, when you're reassembling it, is to coat it with some rubber grease. It just stops any dry surfaces from picking up and possibly splitting or pinching or wrecking your new seal. Always a good idea. We'll do the same with the O-rings in the back of the housing as well. So once you got that on there, same way it came apart, just nice and easy. Make sure it goes in nice and square. You don't have to force it, it'll just work its way in. Something like that. And now you see the shaft is back in there, ready to go. And from there, it's basically just a process of doing exactly what you disassembled it, just in reverse. So first thing to go back in is that bottom plate there. Just remember, it's pretty easy to tell, even if you forget which way it came out. You can see that the pump's been running on this face. It's very obvious which one's the wear face and which just goes against the housing. So that just sits in there, just over the top of your shaft. It's not super important at the moment. Now the next one's a pump rotor. Again, it's the same as that other one where you'll have a mark on the top side. You should be able to see that when you put it in. It doesn't matter where it goes on the shaft, it's just a normal spline. So sit him over the top like that, it's all the way on. Now here comes the other side, the other dangerous part of what we did before, which is trying to get this snap ring back on without losing it. It's another pretty delicate operation. You've just got to make sure you keep your finger on it and don't let it snap off and go flying somewhere that you'll never find it again. So we'll just try and hold it on top with a finger and just try and get one side of it to go down and sort of start. If we can get it to go anywhere and start, I don't really care where it is. And this is just, it's not a very fun job, this bit, but it's sort of one of those things where I think the engineers think you have like 4 hands. So there we go, we're just gonna get it started, and if you just push it down and push it in, and there she is. Snap ring's back on, the rotor's back in, and as you can see, your shaft's locked in, and that's what you want. So from there, the next step, the easiest way to do this is to actually, we're going to change the order a little bit, and it does make things a little bit easier to actually put the dowels back in right now, and they go through that plate in the bottom and into the front of the housing like so. Reason that is that as you start to put this back together, without the dowels in there, that bottom plate, that housing, and the rear manifold can all just free turn. And if you try and put the dowels in later, it's really hard to try and line everything up because everything moves around. This housing, because it's got hollow points and stuff like that to let the vanes slide around, it actually moves side to side and all over the place. It's just extremely difficult to do. So with this housing can go on next. It's the same thing, you just drop that. Remember that the small out of those 4 holes, the 2 small ones, they're your dowels. They're the ones you need to get over the dowel. And there you go, that drops back in like so. The next step is to put all your vanes back in. Now they are symmetrical. It doesn't matter which way up they go or where. I like to put things back where they were, but it really doesn't matter with these things. So as long as you stand them up and you just slot them in just one by one, make sure they're in there nice. This one's being a little bit difficult, so we'll just pull that out. I don't know why that is. Yeah, it seems happier there. So yeah, there you go. There's an example of what can happen. Even slight wearing on some more than others can cause. Yeah, so that one's a bit happier in that hole there. Even slight wear in some can cause problems. So that one's a little bit stiff. We don't really want that because if that vane is in there a little bit tight and doesn't want to slide out like it's supposed to, well, you're going to lose performance in your pump because it won't be operating at 100%. There you have it, as it came apart, all the vanes back in the pump. So next is going to be that first O-ring that seals on the rear manifold. So in these O-rings, they're actually different. You'll feel that one's heavier and slightly larger. It's also got a white dot on it. That's the one that goes at the front. You'll notice that groove is actually deeper. So that one goes in there. They sometimes are a little bit of a pain to get in, but they will go in. So that O-ring's seated in there pretty nicely now. And as we did with the front seal, we'll put plenty of rubber grease on it just to make sure it doesn't pick up and that our manifold will go in there nice and easy like. I like to be fairly liberal with this stuff just because it makes things a lot easier. Just to give us some extra insurance, I'm actually going to put some on this manifold as well before we put that in. There you go. It sort of started. With the new O-ring, it is going to take some encouragement to get it back in. So just give it a bit of pressure. We might need to go find a more solid surface than this bench to try and get that just to go right in where it needs to sit. Right, so just a little bit of encouragement. If you have to, just the wooden handle of a hammer, just some light taps just gets it to seat right in. And that's pretty much where it should sit. It sits right down. It's nice and, it is nice and tight in there, that's what you want, so that you've got a good seal. So the next to go in is the rear O-ring, which is the second one. Remember, it goes in the second groove down here. Don't want to mistake it, put it in the top one. That the snap ring goes in, and it just drops in there. Same thing, plenty of rubber grease. Once again, I'll do the same with my rear cover. All right. So don't forget your spring. Spring sits in the back there. Don't do that. Just carefully carefully drop that cover on. Try and keep it nice and square like so. And now you're ready to put our clamp back on. Sort of hard to do with one hand, but it is doable. Yeah. Just gotta just watch there that the cover goes in sort of fairly nice and square. Again, it doesn't need to go in a really long way, just enough to be past the snap ring groove. Let's do that, same as before. Just need to get one end in the groove. That's it, snap ring back in, release the tension. There you have it. Just check that the snap ring's just seated in there properly, which it is. That is a rebuilt, sealed power steering pump for an LS1. There you have it. It's a freshly rebuilt LS1 pump. We're ready to put that back on the car. It'll stop all of the oil leaks you get down the left-hand side of the block there and all that ugliness. So I believe that this guide can be used for pretty much all of the GM or Holden power steering products. I believe most of them are the same, so that's your Buick or Ecotec V6s and your Commodores. I'm pretty sure maybe even the Holden 5 litre LS1s, they're all pretty much the same pump. And you don't need any particularly special tools or skills. You just need a bit of patience, and you can do it way cheaper than trying to buy a new pump. So I hope you found some helpful information today, and we'll be back soon with some more educational stuff.